Welcome, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. I'm your producer and host of the show, Dr. Lino Martinez. This is your motivational podcast of people's incredible journeys. Oh yeah, let's do this. Welcome back, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. Today, I would love to welcome Laura Hartley. She's an activist and coach helping changemakers deepen their impact while living their most thriving life. Fascinated by the relationship between inner and outer change, Laura bridges system change with self-work to empower changemakers with the skills of getting free, dismantling capitalism and patriarchy from the inside out. She offers coaching and courses and healing burnout cycles in culture, inner leadership, and finding purpose in a climate-changing world. Welcome to the A Little Less Fear podcast, Laura, and thanks so much for waiting months to be on my show. I really appreciate your patience.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
This is an amazing topic. These topics that you have are incredible. They're exhilarating. Actually, when I was going through your profile, I was looking at your topics and I was like, wow, cultural detoxing, the intersection of spirituality and social change. Holy moly, I can't wait to get in this. But before we get into the nitty gritty, what brought you to this incredible journey that you're currently on right now?
Oh gosh, it's a big question.
Yeah, it is. Fun question.
My work is really informed by two different spaces. One, my passion and my love for introspection, for the contemplative world, for spirituality, for personal development. I was raised in a house that was absolutely surrounded by different teachings in this field. And it gave me at a very young age this sense of agency, that we have the ability to choose how we want to respond to the world. But I also found that sometimes that world can be a little bit lacking, that it doesn't necessarily address the problems that we're facing. It doesn't look at climate change. It doesn't look at patriarchy. It doesn't look at white supremacy. It doesn't look at any of the systems that have built our world and our relationship to those systems. As an activist, I'm also aware that, the problems that we're facing, particularly with climate change, go so much deeper than emissions. They go so much deeper than just what are we putting into the atmosphere. It really comes down to our relationship to the earth, our relationship to each other. It is, in its essence, a spiritual crisis. And so bridging these two worlds of activism and spirituality really kind of led me in the path that I am today.
I love how you said this. Our relationship to earth is a spiritual crisis. That's
Absolutely
incredible. Let's talk about this a little more. How is our relationship to the earth a spiritual crisis? Well, first of all, how do you define spirituality? What does spirituality mean to you?
Oh, good question. To me, I think spirituality is really just about connection to something larger than ourselves. That's really what it's about. It can be whatever we define God to be. It can be humanity, it can be nature, but it is about having a connection to something within us and outside of us that is larger than us, than where we are here today. I think when we're looking at this idea of our relationship to the earth, what do we see the earth as for? Because a lot of the time in our culture, we see it as simply a resource, something to be extracted from, something we can take, something we have to manage, something we have to control, something that we're separate from. There's nature and then there's us. Right. I was in Montreal about a year ago. And at the Biodome, which it's like a nature zoo place, they have this massive sign that says humans and the natural world are on a collision course. And this is fascinating, right? Because we're not. Humans are nature. We are the natural world. We're not on a collision course with it. There are absolutely massive problems that we're facing. There is no denying that. But the language that we're using still says somehow we are not of this world. And that it's humans are the problem. And if we just get rid of us, we'll be fine. Or if we just get rid of nature and learn to control it better, we'll be fine. So this is the spiritual crisis that I'm really referring to, that we've lost, I think, a sense of what it means to be human.
That makes sense. Somehow a lot of humans are thinking that we're not of this world or that we're apart from this world. So if we're not of this world, we're separate from. And a lot of us are not seeing that we're all one, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and that we are of this world, like that we are nature. So like especially when we live in, huge amounts of cities, perhaps we don't get as outdoors as often as we like. I live in like the downtown financial core, so I know what that is like. We have this idea that there's the wilderness and there's every other animal on earth, and then there's us, this kind of genius separate species that can somehow defy all the laws that, we're bound to in this very finite and very beautiful world.
Why do you think humans feel this way?
I don't think all humans do. I think it's cultural. I think it's also
Okay.
embedded into our systems, and our systems like capitalism are founded on this idea. I think that when we see the idea that we are not a part of nature, and we've been conditioned over an incredibly long period of time to be disconnected from our bodies, to be disconnected from our hearts, to be disconnected from what is meaningful to us, to start to see us as superior, to kind of, again, lay in that kind of domination paradigm, well, that protects the status quo. It protects a lot of power structures, and it keeps the world running exactly as it is. And I don't think it's as like nefarious, like it's some conspiracy theory or something, but I think it's a natural kind of response to the way the world is made.
Right. So capitalism has in turn turned turned some people into more of having a robotic nature rather than human nature.
Yeah, there's a chicken or egg thing with this belief and our story of separation. I don't think it's entirely the fault of capitalism. I think in many ways it probably pre-exists capitalism, which isn't that old. But, it is one of the pillars of capitalism. Capitalism is built on three principles. First, the pursuit of infinite growth on a finite planet. It is obsessed with growth. It only knows how to define success as growth. The second is this manufactured production of scarcity, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of baked in scarcity because you can't have infinite growth if we don't have scarcity to drive that growth. But the third is this devaluation of like really beautiful living systems like jungles and forests and oceans and our entire human body to lifeless resources, to something that it can extract and take from. Without that worldview, it's very difficult to embed the scarcity and to pursue the infinite growth that it's really after.
That's incredibly true. And that's a really beautiful way to think of it. And that's incredible to think of it that way. I'm still really super duper fascinated here about our relationship to the earth being a spiritual crisis because I feel connected to the earth. And as much as I can, which hasn't been lately, but I love to go for walks and I love to walk in the park or take my grounding and really feeling the magneticism that earth has to provide and giving me that natural energy. And speaking of the word natural, right now, as I'm thinking that, even the word natural has the word nature in it. And people are trying to do things as natural as possible, but yet still leaving nature out of natural.
Mm-hmm. We do. Again, it's this idea that I think we live as a culture, and for so many of us, and this was certainly my experience for so much of my life, we live very neck up. That we kind of see us as just consisting of our thoughts, our stories, the way that we make sense of the world, and we neglect everything that is happening kind of, down below. Like, what are all the feelings and the sensations and the wisdom that I'm getting? And then, all of a sudden something happens in our body. We get the tingles or we get these little like butterflies and, we're just like, oh, that's interesting. But, like all of this, we are part of the natural world. We are sensing and relating to everything around us all of the time. So like, we also have this idea as we live through the climate crisis that again, somehow our worries or our fears are all this kind of intellectual experience, but our bodies know what is happening in this world. Our bodies are relating to what is happening around us in the ecosystems that we're a part of. It makes sense that we're anxious, that we're scared, that we're experiencing all of these things in this time.
How so? How do our bodies know this?
I think it's intuitive. I think in the same way that we have no problem imagining that bees and birds and insects know what is coming, that so many animals are in tune with the world around them, that we think that somehow we're not. Our bodies know, even if we intellectually are not always aware of what that means or aware of our understanding of it. It's this kind of primal connection that our bodies are aware of where we are, they're aware of their safety, and they're aware of their connection to life around them.
Just made me remember just couple weeks ago there was about a week ago there was an earthquake nearby, and I remember talking about earthquakes, and just like a week before the earthquake happened, and that actually makes me, I wasn't aware that I was perhaps maybe tapping into some type of intuition that I have connected with the earth. But now that you're talking about this, it's making me feel that that's actually where that, wonder where that came from. Oh, what a coincidence. I was just talking about this. It's never just a coincidence that I was tapping into the consciousness of the earth and what was going on in closer proximity to me. That's really fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like, look, we as a species, like, perhaps our culture aside currently, like present day, but like there are so many cultures on this earth that have had such an in-tune knowing with the world around them, being able to sense such incredibly subtle signs and changes in the natural world. And this idea that this just kind of goes away, we might not recognize it. We might not be in tune with it. We might not be conscious of it.
Right.
But those patterns of seeing and sensing around us are still there.
So how can somebody become more spiritually inclined to be connected to the earth? How can somebody become more spiritual with the earth and intuitive about it? Or how can somebody begin to, let's say this is the first time somebody's heard this idea, how can someone start?
Oh, I think start wherever we are. For me, one of my practices is watching the birds. That, as I said, I live in this high-rise city, and there's very little nature around. But I do have lots of like pigeons and seagulls and various other birds that are flying about outside. And there is this practice of watching the birds and watching them fly that kind of puts me into a state of stillness. Now, that's just one place, but I think if we're looking at earth connection as something that we want to cultivate, start,
Yes.
looking at the trees, start noticing them, start noticing their roots, notice their leaves, start talking to them. There is no harm in that. Somebody might say you're crazy, but what's going to happen? We just commune with our own psyche.
Right.
There's no harm. Okay. So talk to the trees, watch the birds, notice what is around you, notice the little bits of grass that are coming through the sidewalks, and just start to notice our own body. So often when we think about nature, we think, again, it's outside of us or it's out there. It is here right now. What am I feeling? What am I feeling in my belly and my chest?
Yeah.
What do I notice in my energy? Am I tight anywhere? Am I tense? How can we start to just work with what we've got wherever we are and just pay attention to it? I think from the attention, the practice can develop.
I love this. Being more present with your current surroundings, and as simple as looking at a bird outside and kind of honing in or zooming into the bird's wings and how it's soaring in the sky, and even the feelings that that bird brings to you when you see that bird flying so freely and beautifully up above you. All of this stuff can help you connect.
It can. And I think, part of what comes from this connection and from this awareness is the recognition that these things are not just resources, right? That these trees are not just wood, the ocean's not just there for, us to look at or us to enjoy. Everything has a place. Everything has a season. Everything has a cycle. And so it's from the attention that we start to see, actually, no, this is alive, right? This has its own system that is happening within it. There is so much here that my body is alive. I am alive. What is that for? So it's this awareness that brings us back to the aliveness that is kind of encapsulated within everything that we so often miss.
I love this because the earth is alive, and a lot of people don't see it as a living consciousness. People don't even realize that it has a consciousness.
No, we don't. Well, we don't think about the earth that way. Again, we see it as a lifeless resource, something to take from. But
that sounds awful. A lifeless resource? That sounds awful.
But if we saw it as alive, I think we would find it impossible to do what it is that we do in this world. To be in the crises that we are in, we couldn't be here if we saw this world as alive. If we saw us as stewards of this world, if we saw us as a part of this world, we would not be doing the things that we're doing. We wouldn't be in the crisis that we're in. So that perspective has to change.
How do you envision, hypothetically, the world could change if people started waking up to the fact that the earth is as alive as we are?
Rob Hopkins has this quote that I love to share. And he's talking about climate action. And he talks about, if we wait for governments, it will be too little, too late. If we work as individuals, it won't be enough. But if we act as communities, it might be just enough, just in time. So for me, this reconnection to the earth is just the first layer. That it's about also putting us in touch with what really matters, what brings us meaning, who's in our community, how connected are we? Are we talking about what we're feeling, about what we're going through, creating a sense of safety, a sense of belonging? I think when we start to cultivate that connection, we also start to have ideas. We're like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we actually started this, initiative? Like, none of us seem to have this, or are any of us really happy with the lives that we have? So for me, it's about it kind of driving us into community. It's not about it ending with the individual practice. It's about the wider collective that can emerge.
I love this. So by creating a community, people start to collectively come together, share ideas, and basically vibrate off of each other's frequencies of like-minded thinking, and therefore having similar perspectives and helping raise the vibration of the planet.
Yeah. And also about taking real action, right? Like we need real change and we need it now. And if we do wait for some other person to bring it, we are going to be waiting far too late. We need to be working with the people that we're close to say, hey, let's do things differently. What do you want? What do I want? Let's dream together. Because everything in nature, again, is operating with each other. We live in a world that is built on cooperation. It's not built on competition. It's built on, and us as our species, fundamentally, we're built on compassion. Right. So the more that we can start to bring these qualities and really start to kind of translate them into the spaces that we're in, that's where the power of real change starts.
I love how you said this, that the world is not built on competition. It's built on cooperation and humans on compassion.
Yes, absolutely.
And so we can come from a place more from our humanity, our compassion. And coming from a state of compassion, you then become more cooperative because of the compassionate nature within ourselves. And that opens up the possibility to eradicating the competitive mentality and really just coming in together and for the purpose of love, really. Of loving one another, loving the planet all together, all as one.
It starts here. It starts where we are. It starts in the communities that we're in. This isn't about waiting for some power structure somewhere to change. It's not about us operating as individuals, because that is also not enough. But it is about using our individual practice to call us into the world, to call us into the spaces that we're in, and to enrich them with the values that we want to see.
This is beautiful. This is beautiful, Laura. Laura, how do you reconnect to the earth? Because, I mean, we do at some point at least I do. I get crazy busy. I'm working, I'm editing, I'm teaching, and I'm driving, I'm traveling, and I'm stressed, and all these things happen, and I forget to ground myself, or I forget to go on a walk, or I forget to talk to the trees. Yes, I do talk to trees. You mentioned talking to trees. I talk to trees all the time, but sometimes I forget, and I'm walking, and I'm passing these beautiful willow trees, and sometimes I really have to stop and be like, wow, look at this tree. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. But sometimes it takes me to go back out there and really calm my mind down. But how do you reconnect? I can imagine you get as busy as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, I do all of those things. For me, it's also about water. I was raised near the ocean. I love the ocean. There is something about it that is like just so powerful. So for me, lakes less so, but any large body of water that I can get into, that's where I connect. That's my space.
What does it feel like for you when you reconnect?
Open and slower. A few months ago, I was in this space where I was trying to launch this course, and I felt like I was supposed to do it now. And I was really pushing myself to do all of these things. And I was quite stressed and a little uptight, as you can probably imagine. And my partner and I, we went on this hike, and we went out to the lake, and we just stopped and we just sat there for like an hour, just watching everything go by. And there was no one else around. I was very fortunate. And I just realized that, nothing in that environment was fighting or resisting like I was. It wasn't pushing like I was. Everything was getting done. Everything, that needed to happen was happening. It's not like there wasn't effort either. There definitely was effort. Like, the idea of a bird, again, it's flying. That takes effort. But it wasn't pushing in the same way that I was. And so for me, that was my wake-up call to be like, oh, no, No, this isn't the path again. Okay, come back. What is simple? What is easy? What feels good here? Where can I let my body relax? So much of my practice, especially when we're looking, anybody who's struggled with burnout, for example,
Yeah.
we're often so tight, so stressed. Where can we let our body just relax, just open up, just trust that guidance? Because that's the same space as connecting to the natural world.
That's incredible. And that's wonderful. So when you reconnect to the earth, it allows you to slow down and see the beauty of flow all around you, effortless, with no resistance, and just allowing nature to take its course.
Yeah. And about trusting, right? Trusting ourselves. That's really what it's about. We live in a world where we are so conditioned to push, to hustle, to fight, to keep going, where we live in systems that are built on scarcity, that are built on uncertainty. And so amongst all of that, it's very, very natural that we're going to try and grip and find some safety and hold on. But that doesn't actually serve us. When we live in that state long term, it is not only part of what's perpetuating these systems, it is also what is harming the world, but it harms ourselves. So about returning to this space of just, letting go, okay? Noticing, where can I let it be easy? Where can I have a little grace here, a little gentleness? Where can I see, maybe I can't see where I'm supposed to be going right now with my eyes, but I can feel it inside in a compass. So for me, all of nature connection is really about this. It's guiding us in our lives.
And that is how people can get in tune with their inner compass, by basically slowing down and really feeling what's more natural for that specific person.
It's one way. Again, I mentioned, we're very conditioned in our culture. I sometimes use this term internalized capitalism. And internalized capitalism is just the toxic message that we receive from a system built on what I was talking about before, right? Infinite growth, scarcity, and the devaluation of living systems. When we internalize that message, we receive the idea that our worth is the same as our productivity, always what we produce. And so we end up feeling like, I should have done more today, or, I was so lazy on the weekend. I didn't leave the couch, right? Lazy being, something somewhat shameful.
Sure.
We feel like there's never enough time, never enough resources. I haven't done enough, and we just keep pushing. And so the shoulds and the stories that we carry are really preventing us from following an internal compass, right? Because we're not doing what we want to do. We're not doing what feels good. We're not actually honoring the fact that on the weekend, we did exactly what we wanted to do. Right. We're shaming ourselves for it.
Right.
So the nature connection is one aspect I think is really important, but I also think it's important to identify the stories that exist in our culture, the stories that exist in our families, the stories that exist in our psyches that drive us to do what we do, and start to unravel them one by one.
Is this how part of what you do with your clients in your coaching program?
Yeah. So, I work with a lot of changemakers, activists, world builders. And so we look at this idea of, well, how do we move from the world as it is to the world as it could be? Right? Because we're living in a liminal space right now. But that means we do need to untether ourselves from the stories that have made our world. We have the story of capitalism, as I've said. When we look at the messages that so many women receive from patriarchy as well, usually of not being good enough, or a system built on shame. We look at how we've internalized those messages. And it's in the getting free of them that we start to vision a new world, that we start to believe in our own agency and our own power again. So all of my work is in this space. World as it is, what makes it up? How do we get free? How do we start to remake the world so that it can be more just and more regenerative?
I feel that it could be kind of challenging if you have some clients where they're on this autopilot way of thinking, where the shoulds and the need tos. How do you actually get to work with clients and help them realize that they're on this cycle of these repetitive thoughts that are not serving them? How do you actually get them to shift their way of thinking, getting out of the shoulds and the need tos, and really just hone in on what matters the most?
Yeah. So, two things. I think one is really developing a two-way analysis, so that when we're looking at what we're experiencing, let's say, that I'm so lazy voice, or I haven't done enough voice, I had so much more I could be doing.
Yeah.
We often we know to look inwards, right? We know to look inward and say, okay, well, I'm feeling this. Where is this coming from? We also need to learn to look outwards. Who benefits when I feel that way? what
Oh, I love
suffers
that.
when I feel that way.
I love that.
Start to actually see, where is this coming from in the world? This isn't you, right? This is often a collective problem. And yet we're carrying it on our shoulders alone.
True.
Burnout's a prime example of this. Burnout is a system problem. It is a collective problem that we download onto individual shoulders and then say, well, you weren't resilient enough. Okay, you should have just meditated a bit more or done some more yoga and you'll be fine. It's completely untrue.
Right.
We live in a system that is not built for the well-being of everybody. So we need to develop that analysis. But I also think, this work is a practice. Okay, like it's not a one-time event. It's not just like, oh, I won, I'm done. I went down the river, I bathed, and now I'm free and I'm good. Like, it's like the day-by-day work of being like, no, okay. I noticed the story. Okay, I'm feeling this. Okay, what do I want to do? It feels uncomfortable. Can I turn towards what feels authentic? Maybe I can't. Oh, that's okay. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. If I can, great. It is the practice in this work that's important.
I love what you said right now. Turn into what feels authentic. How does somebody find out what feels authentic to themselves?
I think we notice our body. You see it. It's very intuitive. People light up when they talk about certain things. Their face just goes like amazing.
Yeah.
And sometimes, they feel like heavy and like down and closed. I often, to kind of give you an example of what I'm talking about, a few years ago, I had some friends who were looking for some help with like starting this movement, and they wanted some help with like leafleting and putting some like flyers and letterboxes. And I was like, yeah, sure. You know what? I've been a bit busy. I haven't been able to help much lately. Love to do that. Thinking I could just do it on like my nightly walk or something and, my free time. Turns out it wasn't anything like that. It actually turned into this like big thing with like 4-hour shifts and a buddy system. And it wasn't just like letterboxing, it was like door knocking. And I was just like, oh, hell no. I do not want to do this.
Yeah.
And so everything in my body felt closed and heavy and like, oh, I'm just like anticipating this. And I had all of these kind of stories inside me to say, well, I should do this, right? I said I would. I care about helping my friends. I like to honor my word. I can move these meetings around. It's fine. All the shoulds. And then I started to kind of question them, and I started to be like, okay, well, what do I actually want here? What if I just turned around and said, hey, I'm like really sorry, but this isn't for me, or I don't have the capacity. And I felt like this lightness, this expansiveness, my body opened up. And so that's, authenticness. That is what is true, right? That's the space that we're connecting to. So authenticity, it's kind of become a buzzword, and it can become kind of hard to understand. But to me, it is always about the things that feel honest, that generally feel good, or at least feel meaningful if they don't feel good. And that give us that sense of, ease in where we are.
Yes. I love right now how you described your body with authenticity, because a lot of the times I hear what authenticity feels right to you, what brings you joy or happiness, but you're actually showing and demonstrating how it could feel within your body. You felt the lightness and the openness in your body, and that's what authenticity feels like. When you're being fake or you're doing something for someone else because you should, you tighten the situation and become restrained inner restraint. I don't know if that's the way to say it, but that's really what it feels like to me when you're describing it. And so,
because what I would have turned up and I would have been like, oh yeah, hey, happy to be here, and like here I am, and like I wouldn't have been happy to be there. Like I didn't want to go, but so it's that moment of like expansion that I think is really connected to authenticity.
Why are people afraid? And I say afraid because it comes from fear. If you're not allowing yourself to be authentic, why are people afraid to show that authenticity? Why do you think that? Why do you feel that?
We're conditioned not to. It also comes with risk, right? It comes with risk of rejection. It comes with risk of shame. It comes with self-shaming, because like somehow we've often been taught from a very young age that authentic desire is somehow bad. And so, of course, it's scary. Like it makes sense when
it does make sense.
Nothing in this world, I won't say nothing actually, some things do, but so much of this world is conditioned to tell you that you are not enough as you are. And it sells you everything based on that premise, that you will feel better, you will look better, you will be better, you'll earn more, you'll have exactly what you want, you'll feel safe when you just get the next thing and you reach the next place.
True.
Okay, so to actually turn against the messaging of culture that says you are not enough, and to say, hey, but actually, what if I am? And what if I start to follow what feels good for me? What if I start to really trust this when my parents, my colleagues have all told me it's crazy. When who really can be a musician in this age and earn money, or the risk of starting a business and being an entrepreneur? It's going to be scary and it's going to be uncomfortable, but it is liberatory at the same time.
And in finding something liberatory, that is where you start to cultivate your authenticity.
Yeah. I
love this.
think, yeah. And again, authenticity is also, we think of it as like innate, and I think it is, right? But it's also a decision. It's also the joy that we get to decide what we want to do with our lives, who we want to be. Every day we get to wake up and say, well, what is the difference I want to make in this world? What do I want to experience?
True.
We get to play. There is nothing set in life.
We do get to play. I love this. And I love playing this with you right now. Thanks so much for sharing all this. You're pumping me up, Laura. I love this topic. You said something that stayed in my mind earlier. You're talking about burnout. You said the burnout is collective. How is burnout collective?
Oh my gosh, because again, we live in a world that says you have never done enough. So there's two aspects.
Okay.
There is the external aspect that so many of us do not earn enough money to feel safe, that are working in workplaces that glorify overwork, that say if you want to get ahead or you want to succeed or you want to keep your job, you need to work X amount of hours. Already as a baseline, I think 40 hours is far too much a week for as a general rule, but most people are working far more than 40 hours.
They are.
So there isn't that safety there. There isn't a sense of I can relax and do my hobby and have time for family and for spirituality and for activism and for whatever we want. It's no, you need to work. So the external structures are not supporting us. But then similarly, even when they are, we've internalized that message that says we've never done enough. We always need to be doing more. We see resiliency as how much you can endure, about how much you can push through. I don't think that's resiliency. I think that's endurance. I think, resiliency is a very natural product that comes with thriving. It's just about, bouncing back and growing larger each time. But our systems are not built on thriving. Right. They're built on maximum output. They're built on extraction. They're built on profit. They're not built on our well-being. If they were, our entire economic system would be incredibly different. We'd be measuring more things than just GDP. We'd be measuring, like they do in other countries, time use and well-being and living standards and happiness. But all of that sounds so light when you say measure happiness. Why would we do that? But we can and we should.
Yes. And that is when we can use the word should.
Right? Yes, exactly.
Resiliency comes from thriving. That is an amazing sentence that I haven't heard yet. That's wonderful, and that's beautifully said. Resiliency does come from thriving, because being resilient comes from expansion. And that's what thriving is, expanding. That's really incredible, Laura. My goodness, you're blowing my mind. I love this.
I'm so glad.
So a question that I have here, how do we shift from self-care to collective care?
I think both are necessary, right? I think, again, we've been sold this idea that self-care is just about bubble baths or yoga or something you need to buy. And all of those things are great. If those make you feel good, do them by all means. But real self-care is about meeting our physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. But recognizing we are not just siloed individuals, right? Everything in this world is connected, as we were kind of talking about at the beginning. We are part of a community. Our well-being does not happen alone. We can't thrive ourselves when nothing around us is thriving. Okay. Yeah. I often give this story of a tomato plant that, when you plant a tomato plant in your garden and it doesn't grow, it ends up kind of small and scraggly. We don't blame the plant. We don't look at it and give it a pep talk and be hey, come on, just grow a little bit faster. Or we don't criticize it and be hey, tomato, what's your problem? Why aren't you more like kale? Kale's doing fine. We look to the conditions, right? We look to the soil, to the sunlight, to the rain, to the quality of the nutrients. And it is the same with us. And that is exactly why burnout is a system issue, right? The conditions are not right for our thriving. But self-care is one aspect. Self-care will be the rain. That's one condition that needs to be met. All of those needs that we have. But we also have the needs of our community. We need to be also looking at, once we're resourced enough ourselves, well, how am I supporting others? What are they feeling? What are they going through? When we go to the office, do we know who's looking after sick family members? Who's maybe sick themselves? Do we know if somebody's struggling with purpose or identity? Somebody's having a spiritual crisis or a loss of faith? Do we know what anybody else is really going through at their core? If we don't, then we're not going to be creating the conditions for people to be able to look after themselves. So it's this two-way street that both is necessary, that sometimes we need to accept the care of others, right? Because we're human and we like to belong. It's innate to us.
Right.
It's part of what love is. And we also need to extend that care to others so that we're holding space for us all to thrive collectively and for us all to have the right conditions.
Extend the care to others. I love that. And that's part of our compassionate nature as well. That allows you to be in your natural state of compassion.
Yeah. And this isn't just about like our individual actions, right? Either. This is also about, again, the premise that our systems and our communities are built on. Do we actually have check-ins with each other? Do we have celebrations for each other? Do we have resources that actually provide the basics for people, that, they have a home, that they have shelter, that they have food, that they have healthcare? Like, these are very fundamental basic building blocks of a society that are really foundational aspects of community care. And if our power structure is not providing them, what are we doing about that? How are we challenging that? How are we starting to create it and seed it?
Yeah, what are we doing about that? That's incredible. So how do you help your clients find their purpose? Like, what is theirs to do at that specific time? And I can imagine, I mean, we've got multiple purposes. If there's a plural word for purposes, I don't know. But I'm certain we all have multiple purpose. So how can we find at least one?
Yeah. And our purpose changes as well throughout our lives. It's not like a one and done, like, great, we've got it. Like, it will change and then you'll have to like follow it again.
Right.
What I would say is that I think that fundamentally to my work and to my beliefs is that we all have a role to play in this time. Okay. Yes. That every single role matters, particularly when we're looking at climate change. Again, it's very easy to think, oh, we just need like, more politicians or more activists or more economists or like people in like the engineering space. And like, these roles are absolutely necessary, but we also need artists. We need farmers. We need musicians. We need accountants. We need lawyers. We need everyone where they are. So there is no one specific place that people need to be. But we do need people doing what feels right for them. Because if we are only doing the work that we're doing, whether that is paid work or unpaid work, because we're supposed to do it, then it's never going to be as effective. Impact always follows meaning. And again, our own thriving and the planet's thriving are deeply linked. So we have to look at this. So if somebody's starting to look at, well, where's my calling? Where do I feel drawn to? I'd start to look at, these areas of like, well, what do you enjoy? What lights you up? What do you keep thinking about? What's that little thing in the back of your mind, that idea that's been there for years that you never do anything about, but kind of keep circling back to, but you think is completely unrealistic? Most of us have something like that. That is always an indication. I think, look at what breaks your heart as well, right? What upsets you in this world? Okay. And there's probably a lot of things, but like there's probably something that really speaks to you or something that's local to you. So what breaks your heart? Where do these start to intersect? What do you feel in your body when you come alive? Again, always returning to the body as this kind of compass point. So it's not a specific place. It's not kind of a one thing, but I think it's this intuitive guiding to be like, okay, well, what do I feel here? Because if we can find the space of meaning, if we can find that little spark, that's usually a waypoint into purpose.
I love this. If you can find a spark, that's basically the road to your purpose, which makes sense. And the spark is in your emotions. How do you feel about this? Does it make you cry? Does it make you laugh? Does it bring you joy? Does it bring you frustration? That's usually the heightened emotions is where you're going to find a lot of your answers.
Absolutely. And, it's not like once you find it, oh my God, I love this work. Every single day I wake up and I just feel that exact same spark. Like, I wish it was. But like, there is still an underlying sense of like, yeah, no, this feels right, or this feels true, or this feels meaningful, even if it is hard.
Right. Exactly. So tell us about your coaching program. When did your coaching program start? How did it come into fruition?
So I run a few different courses and I work with people one-to-one. But my first course that I started a few years ago was Internal Revolution: From Burnout to Thriving. So it really centers around the experiences of burnout that so many of us, and particularly those of us like in any sort of change-making, nonprofit, social entrepreneurship space, all experience. Right. And I started that out of my own experiences with burnout and exhaustion, and starting to look to culture and to the root causes more than just myself and blaming myself. And also out of seeing just the immense rate of burnout around me. I saw a burnout in my boss at the time in a completely different field. I saw it in my friends. I saw it in my colleagues. I saw it in all of the people that I was working with. And I realized that something needed to change. From there, it really became this journey as to, well, actually, how do we lay the spiritual foundations of activism? Whatever it is that we do in the world, whatever change making it is we do, however big or however small. What's the kind of roots that we need to be looking at? What are the seeds that we need to be planting? So I do work with people one-to-one, but all of this work that we've talked about today is really more a part of my courses.
And your courses, they're all online courses, or are they online and in person?
Online, live, and starting again in the new year.
Excellent. And how long do your courses go for?
It ranges. So Cultural Wayfinding is my inner leadership course. It's 12 weeks. So we look at this idea of getting free, exploring the stories of capitalism, the stories of patriarchy, the story of separation in detail. Because when we can see the story, right, we are no longer as beholden to it. Just part of that getting free is also just recognizing it, the way it plays out in us, as us, and through us.
Yeah, becoming aware.
Yeah, right? And there's just like suddenly there's that space there and you can see it.
Yeah.
We look at stewarding our power. So what kind of power do we have? How do we feel about power? Are we okay using it? Because a lot of us want to make change, but we're also deeply uncomfortable with power. Or we think, hey, I want to be empowered, but not necessarily have power itself. So we see it as corrupt, bad, dirty, especially for women. There's often like a femme fatale or like a nasty woman story that exists with power. So what are the stories we carry about power and how do we steward it? And then we look at this idea after that of finding what's ours. Because I think looking at our vision, looking at our callings, looking at the world that we want is always going to be deeper after we've done this other work.
I love what you just said, Laura. You said that a lot of people see that being empowered is not the same as power.
Yeah.
So there are people that
power
separate. Bad. I've never thought of it, but it makes sense. I mean, I guess sometimes there's a separation between the two.
Yeah. And
almost as if being empowered is something that magically happens rather than it's already existed within you.
And I think it's the idea that, well, if I'm empowered, I'm not going to hurt anybody else with my power. Like we're very afraid of hurting other people, or that power is always corruptible, or that power is always bad. And so we're like, oh, well, I can be empowered to do my own thing. But that doesn't really extend to actually, well, how am I going to use and wield my power? How am I going to read a room for power? Okay, because all of the time we're influencing power around us. So we have to know how we're relating to it. If we're afraid of conflict, if we're trying to avoid, being seen in a certain light or what people will think of us, we're going to shy away from it. And in this point in time, with so much on the line, not just with climate, with everything that's happening in the world right now, we need so many of us starting to use our power for good. We need to be comfortable with our voice. We need to be able to recognize what's happening around us, how to kind of shift the power dynamics that are happening, how to stop shaming ourselves and others. And yeah, all of this is the work of power.
Do you feel that by utilizing your work of power and having your courses and integrating everything that you've learned, your wisdom and your knowledge, is helping others to become more aware with what they're doing with the earth and hopefully build your own community with everybody that you come in contact with?
It is, I think, again, with all of this work of power, it's a practice, right? But, a part of my journey has absolutely been hey, own it, own what you've got, own your knowledge, share it.
Yeah.
Why not start a business? Why not share this work? So there's this element of backing ourselves that comes with claiming power. And it is fundamentally disruptive to the status quo. You cannot claim power. You cannot get free and do any of this inner work at this level when it's culturally related and not have it be disrupting the status quo. So all of my life is really to be in service to this idea of remaking a more just and regenerative world. That is what I've dedicated my life to. And to do that, I have to claim power.
You're reclaiming power to regenerate the world. I think this is incredible. I think you're incredible, Laura. Thanks so much for
Thank you
sharing
very
your
much.
wisdom, your knowledge, your passion on this podcast and with the world. How can our viewers, our watchers, and our listeners find your programs and find you if they need to get a hold of you?
My website is laurahartley.com. I am also on Instagram at laura.h.hartley, or I'm on LinkedIn if that's your space.
Excellent. Laura Hartley, everybody. Incredible, incredible time with you here. Thank you so much for waiting months to be on the show. It's been worth the wait always. And I'm just really excited to keep in contact with you. Yes, definitely. We're definitely going to stay connected here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun, and all the best.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Dr. Lino Show, A Little Less Fear podcast. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can do so by sending me an email at a little less fear at gmail.com or through an inquiry from my website at www.alittlelessfear.com, where you will always find information on where to get my book. You can get my book on Amazon and Amazon paperback version, Kindle or Kindle Unlimited. And I also create incredible visual video poetry for people that are interested in marketing or even just to send a personal note to anybody or somebody that you might love. So yeah, check it out. I love it. Poetry is my passion, one of my other passions, aside from doing what I do right now, which is giving you all the motivation that you need to keep growing, to keep motivating people, motivating yourself, and to keep expanding. I love you all so much. Have a blessed day and take care. Rock on.